In this interactive video, we're going to cover a few more important concepts of and in Judaism. So first we'll look at the hollowing of life. And to hollow something in this sense means to make it holy and sacred. So the hollowing of life would mean to charge life and all of its components and all of its um, uh, people and places and events with significance and holiness and sacredness. So this is purported to be a feature, an important and critical feature of Judaism, and that begins with ritual. So, on the importance and significance of ritual from like a utilitarian perspective, and utilitarian means useful. Like, is it useful in everyday life? Ritual can often seem like pointless and useless, but its importance in life can hardly be overstated. And here's just a couple examples, like handshaking and greetings, right? Those are rituals. Hi, how are you? How you doing? Good to meet you. Those are rituals. And handshaking or bowing, right? These sorts of rituals help relieve initial awkwardness that people feel when they first encounter one another. We just do that kind of stuff so often that that you don't realize that this is really what it's doing. Is it's kind of awkward to meet a brand new person and see somebody new for the first time. So you do these rituals and it helps to relieve that anxiety, break the ice, if you will. And then funeral rituals help ease grief and bereavement. Somebody that you love and love dearly passes away and then they're just gone, right? That's a massive shock to the system. Grief and bereavement are often an understatement. So funeral rituals help to ease this and help you transition, right? Well, rituals help smooth life's transitions like almost nothing else can. We just rarely recognize them as rituals because they're so ingrained in our behaviors. Right? So to the Jews, ritual is critical. So where the West, which was influenced by the Greek partiality for abstract reason and logic, right? The West emphasized typically theology and creed. The East has approached religion more so through ritual and narrative and storytelling. So in this sense, Judaism takes something of like an Eastern flavor, although it's considered a Western religion. And in Judaism, again, ritual aims to hollow life, right? To make holy and sacred and significant and charged with meaning all aspects of life, all life, ideally. So the name for the right approach to life in Judaism and the world is piety. And the secret of piety consists in seeing the entire world as belonging to God and reflecting God's glory. So the Jews preserve this sense of the sanctity of all things through their tradition and their traditions. So Judaism, which is arguably the most historically minded of all religions, arguably, finds holiness and history absolutely inseparable. So another important concept in Judaism is revelation. And in their interpretation of the major areas of human experience, the Jews arrived at an arguably more profound grasp of meaning than any of their Mediterranean neighbors at the time. Um, The Jews say they did not reach these insights on their own, these insights about the areas of human experience and how one ought to live and how one ought to conduct themselves and think and organize themselves and to live, basically. They said they didn't reach these insights on their own. They were revealed to them. So for the Jews, God revealed himself first and foremost in actions, not in words, but in deeds. So it was through miracles and divine intervention. God took the initiative. And the God that Exodus disclosed was powerful and a God of goodness and love, a God who was intensely concerned with human affairs. So it followed that God would want people to be good as well, and revealed this to his people through, again, actions, events. So suffering must carry significance because it was unthinkable that a God who had miraculously saved his people would ever abandon them completely. All this took shape for the Jews around the ideas of the covenant. Now, suffering we spoke of for the Jews, in the concept of suffering and the meaning that they found in suffering, we discussed in a previous module. But all of this took shape for them around the idea of a covenant. So Yahweh, the the, um, the ancient Jewish name for God, Yahweh, would continue to bless the Israelites if they, for their part, would honor the laws they had been given. We've got a covenant, a contract, if you will. God will bless us if we keep following the laws we've been given. Keep the covenant. Now, on the idea of the Jews as the chosen people is the concept of the doctrine of election. So the idea that a universal God, all powerful, all knowing, and all good, decided that the divine nature should be uniquely and incomparably disclosed to a single people is among the most difficult notions to take seriously in the study of religion. That makes sense, doesn't it? When one is studying religions across the board and across history, when one religion claims to be the chosen people, it becomes difficult um, to take seriously. And not that it deserves to be mocked, but um, nonetheless, right? Kind of like if you are in a group of people and somebody says that they're the most important person in the room, it's often hard to take that seriously because you feel disrespected, right? So the doctrine of election, long story short, the doctrine of election is a controversial notion. Um, so essentially, it can be explained charitably, right? That concept that the Jews are the chosen people, if you want to be charitable about it, you can explain it as a self-interpretation, a Jewish self-interpretation, after having conquered seemingly insurmountable odds throughout their history and coming out on the other end. Right? There's no doubt that the story of the Jews is unique throughout history. And philosopher Nicholas Berdyaev has a quote that says, "The continued existence of Jewry down the centuries is inexplicable, considering the insurmountable odds they've faced throughout their history." So Jews commonly interpret the servant songs from the Old Testament, from the book of Isaiah, as referring to the nation of Israel itself and not one particular person. So we'll take a look at the first two in the next slide. So the first and second songs, the servant songs from the book of Isaiah, go like this. Keep in mind, the Jews, where you're saying I, they're thinking our nation, our people. Right. Here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on earth. In his teachings the islands will put their hope. So this is meant to, like, this is what the Jews as a people, as opposed to just he will not shout or cry out, the Jews will not shout or cry out. I will put my spirit on him, the Jews, right? Anywhere you see I and he and these things, think that the Jews as a people. And then the second psalm, servant psalm, is it is too small a thing for you to be my servant, to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I have kept. I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. To him who was despised and abhorred by the nation, to the servant of rulers, kings will see you and stand up, princes will see and bow down. So the Jews did not see themselves as singled out for privileges. They were chosen to serve. That's the idea. And that's the argument here, is that we're not the chosen people because we're chosen for special privileges and and wealth and glory and power and money, etc. We're chosen to serve. That's what we're chosen for. And to suffer the trials that service would often exact. So this is this is ostensibly how the Jews see themselves when they say we're the chosen people, chosen to suffer and to serve. So then on the modern state of Israel, and very briefly, so obviously Judaism as a religion and a historical religion can't be reduced to its biblical period, and we discussed a lot of its biblical period. In 70 AD, or current era, um, the Romans destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, and the focus of Judaism shifted to rabbinic Judaism, right? From the sacrificial rituals in the temple, right? Public stuff, public practice, public rituals, outward manifestations. After the Romans destroyed the temple, it shifted to rabbinic Judaism, right? Study of the Torah and its accompanying oral tradition in academies and synagogues. It moved from a public practice of the religion to a more private one. You know, you could study in private and hidden away, right? So that sort of shift happened in the year 70, current era. So today, almost 2,000 years later, there are four great sectors of Judaism that still constitute its spiritual anatomy, if you will. And that's faith, observance, culture, and then importantly to our discussion here, nation. So nation meaning the modern state of Israel. So the reasons for the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948, which was just about immediately post World War II, present complex problems that we're not going to dig into in this course. But without presuming to answer these problems, we can do is appreciate the burdens at bare minimum, right? We can appreciate the burdens that this controversial establishment of the modern state of Israel in 48, we can appreciate the burdens they place on the conscience of this people who are particularly conscientious. In other words, the Jews, the argument here is that the Jews are aware, the Jews of modern Israel and Jews all over the world are aware that the establishment of the modern state of Israel is problematic, to say the least, and controversial, to say the least, right? So they struggle themselves with this issue often, is the idea. So there are essentially four arguments for the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948 that it's important to be aware of. These are considered often what's known as zionist arguments. First is the argument from security. Um, so from the renewal of pogroms in Russia, right, like internment prison camps in Russia, where the Jews were persecuted in the late 19th century, to the Holocaust, many, if not most, Jews were convinced that they could not hope for a secure life in Europe, but they really wanted one, right? We need a secure place. Considering our history of persecution throughout Europe, we need a secure place to call our own. That's one of the arguments for the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948. Also, there was the psychological argument, and some were convinced that it was psychologically unhealthy for the Jews to be everywhere they were. They were in minority status because they were, we're talking about a diaspora now. They were dispersed throughout the world largely, but primarily we're focusing on Europe and the Middle East, that this was psychologically unhealthy for them to not have majority status anywhere. There's the cultural argument, and that is that somewhere in the world there needed to be a land where Judaism was the dominant ethos, right? In order to preserve this particular culture, it needed to be the dominant culture somewhere in the world and not just spread all over the place, because a culture cannot persist if it is dispersed too thinly, is the argument. And then there's the social utopian argument that says somewhere in the world there needed to be a nation dedicated to the historical realization of prophetic ideals and ethics, the ones that the Jews crafted from the onset, were arguably responsible for to begin with. The argument says that there needs to be a place where they can at least attempt to realize their ideals and ethics, bring them into concrete existence. So, not taking a side for this way or the other, these are four of the arguments that were levied in favor of the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948. Okay, and so in this video, we covered the hollowing of life, right? How the Jews charge life in all of its manifestations and aspects with meaning and sacredness and holiness, which is ostensibly a defining characteristic of Judaism. The concept of revelation and what that means and what that entails, the concept of the Jews as the chosen people, and also we touched upon briefly the modern state of Israel.